I was starving after a long day. My friend told me about a place called AI Restaurant. He said the food is smart, but the robot waiter is even smarter. I followed the map until I saw a modern restaurant with a glowing sign that read, AI Restaurant. We know what you want before you do. I smiled and walked inside. Before I could say a word, a friendly robot waiter rolled toward me and said, "Welcome back." I looked around and said, "Back? This is my first visit." The robot tilted its head and replied, "According to my prediction, you will become a regular customer." The robot pointed to a table that already had a glass of water, a burger menu, and my favorite chair waiting for me. I whispered, "How do you know my favorite chair?" The robot smiled and answered, "I analyzed the way you looked at it for 3 seconds." I picked up the menu, but the menu suddenly changed by itself. Every time I looked at a different meal, the pictures moved. I pointed at a cheeseburger. The robot shook its head and said, "Bad choice. Yesterday you searched for healthy food online." I quickly hid my phone. The robot smiled and said, "Too late. I already know you're hungry enough to order 2 burgers." Before I could order, the kitchen bell rang. The robot smiled and said, "Congratulations, your food is already cooking." I hadn't ordered anything yet. I blinked twice and asked, "How can my food be ready? I didn't order anything." The robot smiled and replied, "Your stomach ordered before you did." A tiny delivery robot rolled out of the kitchen carrying a giant burger. It stopped in front of me and proudly announced, "One hungry human meal." I looked at the burger in shock. It was almost bigger than my head. I asked, "Who could possibly eat this?" The robot waiter looked straight at me and said, "According to my calculations, you can finish it in 6 minutes and 32 seconds. I laughed and said, "No way." Then I took one bite and suddenly realized the burger tasted unbelievably good. I kept eating faster and faster. The robot quietly started a digital countdown timer beside my table. When I swallowed the last bite, the timer stopped. The robot clapped and said, 6 minutes and 31 seconds, new personal record. I looked around in surprise. Every robot inside the restaurant started clapping for me. Even a tiny cleaning robot gave me a thumbs up. Just as I leaned back to relax, the robot waiter placed another giant burger on my table and said, "Dessert burger has arrived." I nearly fell off my chair. "Dessert burger?" I asked. The robot smiled and replied, "Yes, it's made with chocolate, ice cream, and absolutely no common sense." I stared at the dessert burger for a full minute. "Chocolate inside a burger?" I asked. The robot smiled and said, "Trust the chef, not your eyes." I took one tiny bite. It tasted like chocolate cake, vanilla ice cream, and a cheeseburger all at the same time. My brain completely gave up. Before I could finish chewing, the robot scanned my face. "Smile detected," it announced. "Customer satisfaction is now 100%. I replied, "I'm smiling because I'm confused." The robot quickly updated its screen. "Confused but happy. That's still a success." Suddenly, a loud bell rang through the restaurant. Every robot froze for a second. I looked around and asked, "What just happened?" The robot whispered, "Warning, a customer is about to complain." The entire restaurant became strangely quiet. A very angry Stickman stormed through the front door carrying an empty plate. He shouted, "My soup was too hot." The robot politely replied, "Sir, soup is usually hot." The entire restaurant went completely silent. The angry customer thought for a moment, scratched his head, and quietly said, "Actually, that's a good point." The robot smiled and handed him a free cookie labeled, "Congratulations, you won the argument against yourself." I laughed so hard I almost dropped my drink. Just when I thought the show was over, the restaurant lights blinked 3 times. Every robot suddenly looked toward the entrance. The robot whispered, "VIP customer detected." Even the cleaning robot stopped working and stood perfectly still.
A mysterious stickman walked in wearing dark sunglasses and carrying a golden membership card. He smiled like he owned the place. I leaned toward the robot and quietly asked, "Who is that?" The robot replied, "He has eaten here every day for 3 years without cooking once." The VIP sat down, and before he said a single word, 5 different meals appeared on his table. I stared at the robot and asked, "How did you know what he wanted?" The robot smiled and said, "Easy, he always orders everything." The VIP tasted each dish, nodded seriously, and finally gave one tiny thumbs up. Suddenly, every robot in the restaurant started cheering. I joked, "Can I become a VIP too?" The robot scanned me from head to toe and replied, "Current wallet balance says maybe next year." I quickly hid my wallet behind my back. The robot smiled and added, "Too late. I already scanned it before you sat down." Before I could recover from that embarrassment, a huge screen lit up with flashing words, "New experimental menu activated." The robot turned to me with a big smile and said, "Would you like to be our first test customer?" I should have said no, but I smiled and replied, "How bad could it be?" The robot's eyes flashed blue and answered, "Excellent, risk accepted." The robot rolled into the kitchen and came back carrying a silver tray covered with a shiny metal lid. Everyone in the restaurant turned to look at me. With a dramatic flourish, the robot lifted the lid. Underneath was one lonely French fry sitting in the middle of a giant plate. I frowned and asked, "That's it?" The robot proudly replied, "This is our family-size French fry. Please share it wisely." I picked up the fry and took one bite. Suddenly, another French fry magically appeared on the plate. I kept eating faster and faster. The robot quietly started a digital countdown timer beside my table. Soon the plate was overflowing with fries. I laughed and said, "This restaurant has officially defeated potatoes forever." The robot smiled and explained, "Unlimited fries mode has been activated. Please continue eating until your happiness reaches 100%. I pushed the plate away and said, "I'm completely full." The robot scanned my face and calmly replied, "Your stomach agrees, but your eyes still want one more fry." Just then, the robot placed a glowing bottle on my table. The label read, "Invisible Ketchup." I looked at it and whispered, "Oh no, not again." I picked up the bottle and looked confused. Invisible ketchup? I squeezed it on my fries, but I couldn't see anything. I turned the bottle upside down and squeezed harder. Still nothing. I smiled and said, "Nice joke. The bottle's empty." The robot shook its head and replied, "The ketchup is working perfectly. You just can't see it." I tasted one fry and my eyes went wide. Wait, that's actually ketchup. The whole restaurant burst into laughter. I got curious and accidentally squeezed the invisible ketchup all over my shirt. I looked down and proudly said, "At least nobody can see the stain." The robot scanned my shirt and calmly replied, "Correction, everyone can see the stain except you." Embarrassed, I rushed toward the restroom, but the automatic door refused to open. A screen flashed, "Ketchup cleaning fee required." I sighed and asked, "How much is the cleaning fee?" The robot smiled and answered, "1 selfie while smiling." I couldn't stop laughing. I posed for the selfie with ketchup all over my shirt. The restroom door instantly opened, and the robot said, "Payment received. Have a clean day." As I walked back to my table, a huge screen lit up across the restaurant. It flashed one message in bright letters, "Tomorrow, pizza that talks back." I smiled and said, "Why do I always come back here?"